So with that, I'll call this meeting to order. Really, what we do from really this is important. What we do today is we go through the whole organizational process. We have an agenda which will be welcome introductions and overview for me. I'm going to give my last speech, hopefully. Election of president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and then we start going through with board liaisons and everything like that. And we're getting into the projects and everything. It's a long day, but today's today when we organize it. I've had people asking, what is the president? When we elect the president, what are we really electing? David's done it for a year and a couple, 3 months. I've done it for a year and another 6, 7 months. So let me just kind of give the role of president. So, because we're going to be voting for the president this morning, so there's no confusion. The board president becomes the face of the board to the public. People know there's the board president and they copy the board president on everything because that's the person they want to complain to or compliment or anything like that. The board president is the one voice to management. It was that way in the CCMC contract. It's that way in the Grand Manager's contract. Management has a hard enough job without 7 people thinking that they are management's boss. So the way, and then the board president, how I've tried to do it when I did it was I tried to copy the board on darn near everything. I was very inclusive. Board members then copy the president on everything. The president spends a lot of time talking to the executive director. Lauren got to know me well. That is what the role is. You know, the board president sets the agenda for the meetings, but as all of you know, I would send Lauren and Susanna would send me the agenda. I would tailor it. I'd send it to the whole board a week in advance, tailor it for feedback. So again, try to be very inclusive. When you're the board president, residents right and left are going to reach out to you. They're going to reach out with complaints. They're going to reach out with compliments. They're going to reach out with ideas. You have to give it that time. And it's just part of the job. Board president is a politician. Anybody that tells you differently, they're lying to you. You're trying to balance many different things in the community, many different priorities, stuff like that. As we all learned from this election cycle last year, being a CROA is being a political job. It's just reality. Hopefully the board president can help drive consensus. That may or may not happen. And board president, I mean, we all remember the joke about Brian being a tyrant, but you need a board president who can run a meeting effectively too. Otherwise you can sit there for 3, 4 hours at a time and get nothing done. So yes, Mike, that's in the office because I'm I'm running a meeting. And then whoever replaces me, and it won't be me, is going to have to do the same thing. Okay, but let's talk about what the president is not. Every board member gets 1 vote. The president gets 1 vote. We're not electing a king. We're not electing a queen. We're electing a facilitator. You get to drive the bus, but there are 6 backseat drivers. And it's important because we are a board of 7. And then what I'd like to talk about for everybody.
Brian, just so you know, there's some technical issues right now, so I don't think that people in the audience can hear you. So keep going. Just want to make you aware. Working on it, but he just told me.
Have them call in.
They're
Have them call in.
Or sign off and redo it, yeah.
Sign off and redo it.
Yeah, sometimes that works.
so they can't probably hear us saying that, but.
Can anyone online hear?
I can hear you. This is Charles.
Good. Kevin, can you hear?
Morning, guys. I can hear. Audio is just somewhat in and out. I don't know if it's your location in the room or what the case may be.
Okay, Dick, can you hear? Nick? Hudson?
He might not be.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so then, you know, today we're going to elect the president, we're going to elect the officers, but then how the board really evolves is over a period of 4 to 6 weeks, we figure out how a board really works. And you have different people. We've got two brand new people. You've got different people with different skill sets. We're going to elect a new president today. The new president is going to figure out how he or she wants to run things. And then we start figuring out where the strengths and weaknesses or gaps are with the group. And we start finding board members who fill roles. So it's an evolving process over March and April. And that's just the reality of the board. What I want you to remember as a board is we live and die as a group. It's wonderful during political season to talk about what you would do as an individual. Now we are a board. When they go on Facebook next week and they start talking about the bums, welcome, you're one of the bums. When you speak public on Facebook or somewhere else, people will assume that you're speaking for the board. You can want to paraphrase it and stuff like that, but you speak for the board. So what I want you to remember is we are a team. What we do today with all of our officers are our liaisons and everything like that is we rely on each other, and we've stopped being politicians, we've stopped being candidates, and now we reset the bar. And once we pick the president, I walk out of the seat and go right over there where I love to be, and the new president is going to sit here and start taking control, and we watch it evolve. The way we do the picking of the president and on the other three officer positions is every person will declare, are they interested or not interested? Then if we have 2, 3, 4 people and everybody can be president if they wanted to be or declare themselves as president, then we'll ask whoever's interested to state the case for why they should be. The reason I kind of went through this rambling thing a little is so you can almost speak to, okay, this is how I think I could do the job. We then take a silent vote. Lauren and I drafted Gary, who did it before last year. We'll look at actually a silent piece of paper. Whoever gets the most votes is the president. It's not announced how many votes. We just say the president is XYZ and we roll forward. So with that as background, I'll be happy to go first and we'll go right down the line. It's no great secret. I announced it several times, but I've been president twice. I've been vice president. I've been treasurer twice. And this year, in my dream world, I will be director at large. In the world, I will also be happy to be treasurer. I can do that job pretty simple. I will not be president. I will not be vice president, and I will not be. Not asking any of you, the rest of you, to answer any question but president now. We can let it evolve. But Jim, are you interested in being president? Yes or no?
No.
Celia?
No.
David?
No.
Jackson?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, so with that as background, continue with the same order. Jackson, can you please just give us a little talk on why you would be a good president, and then we'll have Cindy do it, and then we'll organize the vote. Thank you very much.
It would be difficult for anyone to follow in Brian's footsteps. But the fact that Brian has been the president, that David has been a past president, means that we have an incredible abundance of skills and abilities here on this board. Recognize that over a period of years that I've served the community and on the board, that my label has been controversial. But there are different roles at different times for different people. And the role of the president that Brian has just laid out is one of consensus and bringing people to consensus. I think it's also a role that requires a degree of professionalism in order to work with a new management company and to change the direction of this board from being the intimately involved and deeply involved and in the weeds to professional management. And delegating and finding the strengths of each of the 7 board members, taking advantage of the strengths of the management company that we work so hard to hire and we all unanimously as a board agreed to hire, is, I think, one of the primary responsibilities of a president. I have led my own company for over 30 years. I have been successful in leading groups of people. I have enjoyed being the director at large. It's given me a great deal of freedom, and I've thrown a few elbows, and a few of you in this room have felt those elbows. But the role is different. And I if you give me the honor of being the president, what I promise you is that I will seek consensus. I will seek to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that we move for the best interest of this community, the entire community, every member of the community, the people that voted for us, the people that didn't vote, the people that voted against us. I'm really excited about where we are as a community. I think we are ready for Celebration 2.0. I think this is the time, the inflection point has been reached. And I think it's now time to have a president of the board that can continue what we've done, continue the velocity at which we've gone, and lead us into that next step. I'm honored that Cindy is running. I have great respect and friendship for Cindy. Happening quite this way, but I'm going to ask for your support as a board, and I will support Cindy if she is elected as president.
Thank you. Cindy?
Tell me if I'm talking too loud or not. I have a habit of talking very loud. So let me start by saying when I came to the board last year, I felt, fairly well prepared. I had been to many board meetings, and I had seen many boards with different mixes of people and how they operated. But I still watched, and I listened, and I learned. After a couple months, as Brian said, I could see that this group, or that former group, could really get things done and work together. I mean, everybody had different personalities, but you could tell that, we could come together and work for the better of the community. Impact on Celebration. So looking back this past year, of course, I think everybody will agree that our biggest achievement was hiring Grand Manners Management Company. Surprisingly, each of us were given the information on each of the candidates when it got down to the nitty-gritty. And all of us worked independently using our own criteria and, came back as a group to discuss who everybody selected. And to my utter amazement, we all picked Grand Manners. So that told me that we all had the same vision for Celebration going forward, as Jackson mentioned, like a Celebration 2.0. So along with that, this board realized that every facet of this community was in dire need of a reboot. Our maturity was showing, not always in a good way. The town was looking tired and unkempt due to a lack of oversight. Emails and voicemails were getting unanswered here at Town Hall. Many residents were feeling ignored and disconnected. We recognized that the effective communication was still an issue despite our best efforts to turn that around, especially when it comes to town business and what's going on. So this board gave Grand Manners very specific marching orders. Simply fix it. Now, to those in the community, those of you that are listening, you may not see change just quite yet. Maybe you have, but trust me, things are moving in the right direction. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, but there is much that's needed to be fixed. They're working on it, but it's going to take time. So this board also and a lot of steps to refresh and add to our amenities. Basketball court. Lots of people talk about the basketball court. In the very near future, you will see a complete redo of basketball court. Now, we as a board made this decision and chose a contractor a good 6 months ago, I want to say. But we were at the mercy of the contractor who was trying to find workers, who was trying to get supplies in order to complete this job. But the last I heard, in a very short time, that will all come to fruition and we'll have our basketball court back with some improvements. Pickleball, after many years of talking and tossing and whatever, that's coming to fruition, hopefully soon. And we have also identified a piece of property that we want to put a lawn sports facility in for all ages. And so that is, now we're starting discussions, and you'll see more about that as time rolls on. So personally, I feel really good about what this board has accomplished so far. However, during this election cycle, it became painfully clear that there are many people in this community who feel that the board is not acting in their best interest. Even if this is based solely on perception, it needs to be addressed. I believe it's important that we have the trust and support all of the community for as much as we can get. If not corrected, this can become a major obstacle as we try to move forward and do things, in this coming year. The community deserves a board that they feel is constantly watching, listening, and learning, just like I did when I first came on the board. I believe as president, I would be the best catalyst for that change, and if elected, I will do everything in my power to fix it. So I started tossing around some ideas of what I might do to get that ball rolling. So the first thing I thought was maybe I want to make up a short questionnaire to go out with the Friday Flash if JR doesn't mind. Nothing scientific, nothing specific, just to gather some information for myself so I can kind of see, where we need to start, what people are looking for, and just to gather some information. Of course, I would share the results with everybody, just so you know what's going on. Another thing I thought of was just spending time here at Town Hall. If I have to be in the neighborhood, just popping in, seeing who's here. Maybe it's Tom, getting his ID, dropping a few hi's. How you doing? What's going on? Anything I need to know about? Whatever. I thought of having office hours here. A rotating schedule. So maybe the first Monday, it's Monday from 9 to 11. I'll just see if I can get a conference room, and I'll just be sitting here. Big sign, president is in, or whatever. And people will know this, and if they want to come in and gripe about something or ask me questions or just get to know me better, they can. The following week, it would be maybe Tuesday from 11 to 1. So we get every day of the week, different time slots, as late as 5 to 7 maybe. When people get off work, then they can swing by if there's something that they really feel that they want to discuss. Another thing I thought was coffee with Cindy, or your favorite beverage. And I was thinking maybe that could be on a Saturday morning once a month. Keep it at small groups or so. We'd have to probably point anybody, if there's anybody to disappoint. But if it's a group of 10 or so people that all have the same issue and they want to come on down. If it's, you just want to, again, get to know me better, ask why this is happening, ask any questions, you can do that in a very comfortable, environment, get to know some of your neighbors, and we'll see how that goes. The last thing I thought about was a daily brief. Goes to the nobody knows, or many folks feel they don't know enough about what's going on with the town business-wise. I thought was every day on the Friday Flash thing, thank you, JR, but it wouldn't be a Friday Flash. It would be, I would give you just a couple bullet points. For instance, the Recreation Committee met last night and have decided that they are going to begin planning a mother-daughter event. If you have any suggestions, please email blah, 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 blah. If you would like to attend the next meeting, they will be meeting blah, 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 blah. And maybe one other thing, but just, so people will see that things are going on, what's going on, if there's something that interests them, that'll maybe encourage them to come to a meeting if they've never been. And so that was another idea. But the bottom line is, I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts on why I would like to serve as president. Whatever the outcome, I look forward to working with you folks and you folks and you folks to make our community better and stronger. So, thank you very much.
Lauren, Gary, can we take the vote, please.
Like there's about 20 slips there.
You can only vote once.
Just one?
Just observing.
Where's the stove where we throw them in?
Yeah.
Oh, good idea.
Sparkle occasion.
That's right.
Supposed to write something out there.
I guess
I'll
so.
put your name in.
It's a smiley face, dude.
I'm so excited.
Need one person looking
I'm
at
going over there.
Yeah, yes.
Let's not have our first vote as a board be contested.
Good call, Brian. It's your last act as president.
To make sure that we're really electing somebody.
You didn't waste any
You
time.
didn't waste any
You didn't
time
even
with
have
that,
an announcement. I don't think.
Is that the presidential panel?
There was a spring in that chair.
Don't you get to announce
I'm
it?
gonna be right down here by Susanna, I know where the door is at.
We have a majority, the majority in Jackson.
Longer sit
No
in
longer
the
hide in
audience.
the corner.
The rules are different,
Now I can spread out.
Mr. President.
Can we take a 5-minute recess while we reset? I think I covered for it. All right. Or baggage, I'm not sure which. And thank you for your confidence, and I look forward to moving forward as a board and with the community and making us the very best that we can be. And I just saw they made my coffee decaf. Here we go.
When you're the new president, you don't need any more caffeine.
The next item on the agenda is the election of a vice president. So we'll follow the same process that we began. We'll go around the room, first indicate if you have an interest, and then we'll ask you to speak. So, Jim.
I do not, thank you.
No, thank you. Oh, maybe. Oh, no.
David,
Yes.
Jim, or Bill. I think it's by acclamation then. David, do you want to?
I have a speech.
You have a speech, please.
I don't have a speech.
David, will you agree to a vote for yourself? That's what you gotta answer.
I would agree.
Okay, then he's got enough votes.
All right. Congratulations.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Honored to serve and honored to serve with Jackson.
The next position is secretary. We'll follow the same process. Jim,
I am not interested, thank you.
Celia,
I'd like to try to be secretary.
Secretary,
I'd
yes.
like to try to be secretary. I think I can handle that.
You have to pass me.
I have to pass you. Bill,
No, thanks. I can't read my own handwriting.
Cindy,
No, thank you.
Brian's already said no. So Celia, you got a speech, but I think if you'll vote for yourself, you're the secretary.
Congratulations.
And the final position is treasurer. We'll go through the same process. Jim,
I am not interested, thank you.
we've got you, we got David, so many things. Bill,
If nominated, I'll serve, but I would prefer to do something else.
Cindy,
If Bill's interested and Brian may be interested, then I'll pass.
Brian.
Want me to do it? I'll do it.
I defer to the man who knows the difference between the threes and the sixes.
If elected, I will be happy to serve. I've done it twice, I can do it a third time.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Then I would say that Brian is the treasurer, and we have our officers. So thank you all.
Will also say out loud that I will not be the chair of the finance committee, so as treasurer, so somebody is gonna have to step up on that group.
Oh, it's not, you wouldn't be on the ship anymore.
What do you want?
I don't think Bill can be on. It's 6 members of the committee plus the treasurer, so Bill's not gonna be on finance.
That becomes a new question.
He can't, actually, the way it's worded is it's 6 members of the community plus the treasurer. So I don't think Bill.
So board members cannot serve on committees, is the point.
So you're kicking me off the finance committee?
You have been kicked off.
No, you kicked yourself off.
Oh, okay.
But we will find lots of other fun things for you to do.
We'll fill your plate, Bill.
Oh, the treasurer is.
Oh, that's right, I forgot.
Because-
Never mind.
Thank you, sir.
That's why I said not to. Never mind.
The important stuff is taken care of. I have caffeinated coffee. All right, so the next item of business on the agenda is the appointment of board liaisons. We've done this in the past, and then let's talk for a minute about how we would like to do this going forward. Historically, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've really just asked for an indication of interest, and where we've had a board member already on the board that's had a relationship with a particular committee or group, and they've expressed an affinity for staying there, I think we've tried to honor that where we can. Typically, there have been 2 board members tasked with a particular group, a lead and a second, because it's obviously a lot to attend and be involved with. Later today, we're going to talk about how much involvement we should have and need to have in these committees and groups. For some of the organizations, it's pretty minimal. I mean, frankly, for others, it's pretty intensive. And so I'd like to hear from the rest of the board what your thoughts are about how we do this process. We've got a sheet, all of us on the board have been given a sheet with, I think, everyone's names, and the opportunity to just go down the list and say who's interested. Where we've got more people interested than spots available, then I think we have to discuss and reach some agreement about that. Right?
Can I make a comment, please? Sure. I think actually when I look back at last year and some of the pickleball drama, I think probably last year's president made a mistake. And I think we would have been better served if we had defined upfront what a board liaison really is. Because I think to me, in my way of thinking, board liaisons really think about politics of what's going on. Because again, I'm just being blunt with you. I think politics with everything in CROA and really communicating better with the board. And I think we got disjointed from the recreation committee, and I think that was a mistake. And I've seen other things with them. So I think we would be better served having, because sometimes people just click their name and then say, well, you can put my name there, I'm never going to do anything. On some of these committees, if it's major, we really ought to talk about it. If you're part of special events, if you're part of recreation, if you're part of some of these groups, it's a commitment of time, and you really need to spend some time working with and getting to know the people on the committee much better than I think we've done, so that there is better liaisoning, because it may take a little more time up front, but I think it saves us time and a lot of anguish on the back end. And I think that's one of the lessons.
And I agree with what Brian just said. The other side of that is, I think, and we'll have a discussion today about what's the role of the committee and the committee chairs and standards there. So I think both of those get redefined, and I think that's in tandem, if you will.
Any other thoughts?
Asset for the community, but they're, make recommendations to the board.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the relationship between committees, task force, and the board.
Exactly.
That's coming. So we're sort of going into the void, not knowing exactly where we're going to come out on this, but I do think we need to identify where the interests lie and see what we've got. So Question is that we begin on this list. We'll take the first item, which was CCDD Liaison. We've got a couple of new board members. You may have some questions about what these things are. I will try and give you a very brief explanation, but others are welcome to add to that. And then we'll just ask for expressions of interest if that works for everybody. The CCDD obviously is our sister governing organization. They meet at least once a month. They have workshops. They have a variety of special projects and task force. One of the big things that they will deal with this year will be incorporation. Historically, CROA has had 2 representatives to the CCDD to attend and interface and work with CCDD members. Because of the sunshine laws, you can't talk to all of the CCDD at one time. That could be good or bad, but the reality is that there's a fair amount of communication that goes on between our board and the CCDD supervisors and their management company. Warren talks to Angel at Infomark and coordinating that information. The time commitment, Brian, you were the CCDD lead last year.
I think, I mean, I'll go back, I'll make a statement. I actually think we should only have 1 liaison to every committee, because I think when you have 2, having 2 people at a meeting is overkill and it's a lot of time. If you're the CCDD liaison and you know you can't make a meeting, ask one of the other 6 people to attend for you. I think we did a much better job, especially now that Jack's on the CCD board and Greg was president, of actually working together. But the CCD takes time. Go to the meetings. You speak at the meetings about what's going on at CROA. You listen to stuff. We've had interaction on lots of different things. So it's actually a meaningful role. I mean, some things like the school board really is a nothing burger. You don't do a darn thing. But the CCD takes some time, and it's actually kind of interesting. And my recommendation to the board would be that we have 1 person for each one. And if you can't make a meeting, then let somebody stand in, because these things are real commitments.
I agree with that.
Okay. Any other comments about that?
I've done that in the past, and it's been it has been that liaison 2, 3, 4, I don't know, years ago, and it is actually interesting.
I think also too, you know, coming from the other side with the committee and relationship with Brian, I think 1 person is important to kind of have and know that that's the person that you're gonna work with, especially as the chairman, and being able to get a sense of that relationship. I think it's really important. You know, Brian, I think with us, that's all I can speak with, did a great job at doing that. So I think I would agree with my.
And just to dovetail on that, I was if you will, the second liaison, and often when I would pop in, it's like, I know they had already discussed it, so I felt in the dark. So it was like catch up. So the idea of one liaison, I think makes a lot of sense.
And actually, Jackson, there's 14 things listed here, and there's 7 board members. 7 times 2 is 14. If we divided it up,
It's that math thing again.
That's why I'm the treasurer.
So if we divided it up, everybody gets 2. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So it might be interesting to see where, like you were talking earlier, where are areas of interest and how you divide them up.
All right. Any other comments? All right, well then let's, with CDD, I think what I do first is ask for an expression of interest. If you are just raise your hand if you're interested in being that representative. Yeah.
Pause for a second.
Sure.
My interests generally lie with things that are process, obviously housing management, that kind of stuff. But physical things, construction, all those kind of things. And I'm not sure where the best fit on all of these is. So those would be the boards I'd be most interested in.
Right.
One area, and I'm going to try to answer Bill's question specifically. One area where I think the board has been very weak for all 4 years that I have been on it is ARC. And I have 0 interest. And I'm just being honest, but we haven't, it's almost been like somebody says, I'll do covenants at ARC, and then they really don't care and they don't go. I mean, it would be nice. I think we've got a lot of ARC and covenants issues. So if that is an area that interests Bill, it would be a godsend. And or I'm not going to try to exclude any other board members, but there's a couple of people who really care.
Let me point out on your sheets, we're missing a couple of lines. I think we're missing ARC, and I think we're also missing legal. Just That's my, I know some of that was reorganized from the
Did you say legal?
legal.
So if I may, to Bill's point, might it help to do a very quick rundown of each, so you see the lay of the land before you commit to one, and then it's like, oh, this other one is of more interest.
Right.
I'm glad to do that quickly, and then you all can add in.
Okay.
Celebration Foundation, I think we're all familiar with. The liaison, I'm not asking for expression, but I get it.
But it was new this past year.
It was. We had not had a formal affiliation, but it is connected.
She's pre-announcing.
I know there's a lot of that.
What do you mean there's a lot of that?
No.
Glad I sat here. Okay,
Okay.
moving on.
Moving on. The third item was CJC board membership. I want to point out that the CJC board is going to change. At this moment, we have 2 seats on the CJC. It is likely that we will have 3 at some point in the future, but as of today, it's 2. And that is the joint committee is made up of CNOA, the Non-Residential Owners Association, and CROA. And CJC meets quarterly for 15 to 30 minutes. It's a relatively modest expenditure of time and energy, could become considerably more important in the second half of the year. The Condo Council, yes,
Can we
please.
just expand on that a little? It's not a secret. We've been told by Disney they plan on stepping back from COA and CJC boards. I think the CJ, if that does from being 15 minutes once a quarter or an hour once a quarter to a real honest to God job, that's going to require a lot of political negotiation and skill with CNOA. So that's a lot possibly.
So if I may, so dovetail on that, while we only have 2 seats today, my suggestion would be that we identify 2 and then have a second, have a third identified in the wings, so that if and when, don't know timing, then that's already determined, and CROA will, by their charter, the CJC charter, have the majority.
And for the sake of the audience online or in the room, I mean, Disney, or I'm sorry, TCC had 3 of the 5 seats for CNOA and CJC. So we always knew who the chair was going to be for both operations, and we knew how business was going to get done. This would be a game changer in how business is done.
Yeah. Big decision.
Sorry, we're working on power strips here. Could we, Suzanne, could we get power to this device? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, the next item on the list is the Condo Council. Condo Council meets with the representatives of the condominiums in Celebration. Celia, how often has council met?
We meet every other month.
Every other month. And the Condo Council liaison, which has been Celia, sets the agenda, coordinates, answers questions from the condominiums. So it's an important position, and it takes some time to do it right. Yeah, go ahead.
And yes, and some of the history of that also was helping better prepare their boards and management to do their own operations, because they are their own operations. So some of that might be some training.
Absolutely, I think there is.
The rights and responsibilities, and how do you run a meeting?
And how
How do you resolve issues?
condos aren't part of Grand Manners.
Right,
People
right,
seem
right,
to
right,
forget
right.
that, condo
Right,
owners.
exactly.
All right, next is covenants. I think you're all familiar with covenants. Covenants meets once a month, Cindy, is that right?
Yes.
That's the formal meeting. Then there are a fair number of covenants issues as we are transitioning to Grand Manners and the work with covenants inspections. My guess is covenants becomes a more significant role in terms of trying to figure out the process and how we make that work, and to make sure that we are consistent in coordinating with that committee. Do you want to add anything to that discussion, covenants? Am I missing anything? Okay. Dog park. We've got a significant investment in the dog park. That committee meets how often, David?
It's monthly.
Monthly. And one of the big issues there will be lighting, I suspect. And so there'll be some work to be done with that committee.
But also revamping rules and regulations, enforcement, that sort of thing.
Right. Finance. Brian, you want to talk about the finance committee?
Really, I don't think the finance committee rep is the treasurer. So I don't really think finance needs to be on here. The treasurer is there, and that's how we're set.
Parks and Recreation. I have been, along with Celia, a liaison to that committee. There's a lot of heat. There's a lot going on there. As we talk about amenities, as we add amenities, as we talk about usage and contracts, there are significant requests for proposals coming for partner programs in this next year. I think recreation will be a major investment. That committee meets once a month, but they also have workshops once or twice a month. And it's a significant investment of time and energy in that committee. Celia, you want to add anything?
It's tiring sitting through those meetings because they really they really pick everything apart and do what they're supposed to do. But it's a long process, 3 hours sitting there.
Next is special events. One time a month? Okay. And who's been our special events? It's been you. Okay, yes, all right.
My backup,
Assistant.
Okay,
my assistant.
okay. You want to add anything to what I think we all understand what special events does,
It's
but.
the most fun committee to
It
be
is.
on.
Okay. Good, good.
It is.
That's nice. One that we've got listed is service areas, which is kind of amorphous. This includes Artisan Park, 600 homes, but it also includes our other service areas that are the common house, common exterior projects in the community, places like Parkview, Charleston, Savannah Square, and so on. Have executive committees elected in many of those service areas. The liaison often has met with them. Susanna has been working with those service areas for years now. We're going to miss you deeply. But that work can be, it can go from a lot to very little, just depending on what's happening. We've had some litigation that has affected service areas, and so it can impact that as well. Some of these service area executive committees meet regularly, others have not met very often at all, and they're just starting to form. So, else to add to service areas?
Their executive committees are really like condo boards.
Yes, they're typically 3 to 5 members elected by their service area owners. And depending on what's going on in that community, it can be a lot more. In Artisan Park, there's a 5-member Artisan Park committee that has not only the committee, but they have subcommittees. And you'll see on our agenda next week, we have a number of items from Artisan Park to deal with and approve. So it just depends. Now, Island Village will have a service area for the multifamily housing, but Island Village as a whole is not a service area. So
Multifamily housing, meaning like townhomes,
yes,
4 under one roof, but all those townhomes, wherever they
it's
are.
one service
It's
area.
one service area.
Yeah, so it's a little different, I mean, in some significant ways. Technology, well, I mean, we've got the former president of the technology committee, so maybe you should explain what that.
We work on technology stuff. No, obviously, we have a lot of things going on. I do want to kind of give you my thinking process around this since Tuesday night. Is one of the things that I had said is if I'm fortunate enough to be on the board, I want to be the liaison for technology because I know them so well, right? But I started to think about that a little bit more. Someone else is going to be the chairman. They could potentially be in my shadow. And really, as Brian just mentioned, it's not to add more expertise to that committee. It's to represent that committee and give them the political perspective of the board, which Brian was excellent at doing. And so I probably won't stick my hand up for that. I would like the tradition to continue that the president is the liaison to the technology committee, but that's up to you.
The job, Jackson.
Fantastic. Next on our list, we've got 2 task forces, and I think that I'd like to open this up for comment. We did have liaisons to the task force. The task forces were created really in the absence of management being fully invested at that point in time.
Could
Now,
Could you just, for the people listening, because I know this was a big question that I got last month. What is the task force for? Many people think that it's to come back potentially and give information, pros and cons about a decision. I don't believe that the pickleball task force is for that. I don't know about the lawn sports task force, but can we talk a little bit about what a charter is basically for a task force?
Yeah, let me start with Brian and we'll go to David. And
Yeah.
I actually think, so let's be honest. When we started, let's talk about pickleball, which I think is better to start with. We have and I'll get this wrong, but we have a Celebration Pickleball Club. We ended up forming a task force because Neil Bresnahan, who was the executive director back then, suggested to the board in June that you need a task force. I actually think the formation of the task force for both lawn sports and pickleball was blame it totally on the past president, because it confused people and it actually boomeranged and forced me in September to get heavily involved. And part of this is probably my ignorance on how much we probably should have had the recreation committee more involved and stuff like that and got better consensus, because we ended up getting to a consensus position when I took the position as president that I was just going to copy everybody on the task force, everybody on the recreation committee. I was going to copy Lee Moore and Steve Button and anybody else who thought they were important enough to need to be on emails. And I just started copying everybody in the world. And it still forced difficult conversation, but you got us there. So to me, when I look at, I think pickleball today doesn't really need a task force at all. Pickleball, we know we've got lots E. We've got the drawings. We're on March 9th, we're going to sit here and do it. Really what we need probably is just a board liaison. The people on the task force, Mike Jackson could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're all part of the pickleball club and management anyway and stuff like that. Are we going to use them to look at what's going on there? Yes, but it's really going to become management's responsibility. And when Susanna is replaced, that new person, he or she is going to run with it. And there probably just needs to be a board liaison for a period of time to make sure if there are questions about politics or other crap, it happens. When you talk about lawn sports, I think the exact same thing has happened. And lawn sports is, in my opinion, 2 months behind pickleball. We've got designs, we've got some cost estimates. I sent you some stuff, but you know, we really need to go through, okay, how many people play? Because the difficult decisions on pickleball and the difficult decisions on lawn sports are the same decisions. How much money is the board willing to spend? Well, task force can't decide that. Okay, then how are we going to take that design and change it and ratchet it down? You know, even the recreation committee probably would have ideas, but doesn't want to get in the middle of those politics either. So it really comes to the board level. And I think the task force worked great when Gary was in charge of the charter one, when Gary was in charge of the RFP one, because it was clearly understood by the whole community what was doing, and it was a project for a period of time. And it had the power, but it still had the power of the board. And, you know, on these major projects where we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, we should fooling ourselves and just admit the board's going to have to deal with the politics of spending that much money. The residents have got very fair questions. I'm not casting aspersions anywhere. I think we set some people up to fail. So I think that is what I really believe.
Let me go to David, I'll go to Jim.
Yeah. Let me just ask a technical question. The microphones are for the room only and the other sound system is for Teams. Is that correct?
Yeah, these mics go to Teams.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about speaking into the microphone as long as you can hear me? Okay. So my take on those two task forces is that, to me, a task force is time limited and focused. And the purpose for us, I think, was to have specialists in those topics engaged. So we didn't have specialists per se about pickleball on the recreation committee, which would be a logical place, nor on lawn sports. So I have a different take. I don't think it was a mistake to have those two task forces because we needed that specialty expertise and insight. It was confusing and maybe politically challenging, but I don't think it was a mistake. So that's just a different view, and we'll, maybe that's the first disagreement we would have. No, but I think that's just a different thing. So I think they're time limited, and I think basically we're done with those two task forces moving forward. There'll be questions along the way as we do designs and the board makes decisions, but I think things are in the contractor's place and then the board's place to authorize funding and next steps. That's my opinion.
In the great knowledge of the board who established the technology committee, I don't know who was on the board then. What they did is very good, because this is a challenge. 7 people on a committee, especially in technology, you can't cover every single thing and every single thing that technology touches. So what we have is the ability to basically appoint someone as a subject matter expert, a SME, for a particular project. SME, S-M-E, subject matter expert. Yeah. And so, so I think something similar we could potentially look at doing for the board for these people, 1 or more people. And it's very clear that these people have expertise in whatever it is. It's not a pickleball task force to decide on pickleball. It's a pickleball subject matter expert group that we can go back to and talk to and say, if we did this, how would it affect how the play happens?
Okay. So
Let me, Bill had raised his hand.
No, it just seems that there's a differentiation. I mean, having been with Gary on those other 2 committees, there's a beginning, a middle, and the end, and it is a specific project, and one was more advisory than the other, but nonetheless, lawn sports and pickleball seem to have a beginning, middle, and end, and those are like special purpose task force. But Garden Club, I assume, is going to be here for a long time, and that may be a different type of task force. And I'm not even sure why Garden Club is a task force. I'm looking forward to find out.
Celia, and then I'll come to
okay, so
It shouldn't be.
I'll piggyback on what Jim was saying about the task force. Like, the board is a liaison for dog park, finance, parks and rec, special event. Maybe there should be 1 person from that specific task force to be the liaison
the board.
to the board. Because like Jim said, they're the expert in this. They're the one, pickleball knows pickleball, lawn sports know lawn sports. So maybe have 1 person work with management instead of having a whole task force.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, and I suspect that's what you're going to suggest, right?
Yeah, I think there's kind of 2 different issues here. One, you have your current task force that were kind of performing the role that your management company should have been performing, going out, gathering the information. Here's your options. Here's what costing would look like, and then presenting it to Parks and Rec and then eventually to the board. But management would be liaising with those who play pickleball in the community because they are the subject matter experts in that area. So they would be fully involved with them in terms of what should it look like from a user perspective. So I think there is kind of that SME combo that you're both talking about, and then your management company can step in and really take the role that the task force has been performing.
Also be 1 specific board member as liaison to that also, no?
I don't
think we need that now.
I think that invites a little
that.
bit too much of getting in the weeds of everything. I think if there was a question that we felt that we needed board input on in the early stages, then I think that's when we would come to the board and say, hey, I think we need your involvement a little bit more.
Cindy, did you?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree with Lauren, I agree with David, I agree with the SME concept, because you could hire somebody to do the drawing, say, for the pickleball court, and they're very good at that. And they look at this piece of property that looks like this, and they say, okay, we can put a pickleball court here, and we can put 1 here. You're going to need somebody who plays to say, well, that's not going to work because the sun is going to be over here, and, we have to work out something different, because we won't be able to play if the sun is in our eyes for, 6 hours out of the day. So I think you need that expert piece. And that probably a task force is overkill at this point.
Right.
Oh, listen, this is interesting. I like this SME thing. When, that Susanna and I had lunch the other day, and I'll make a comment here because I was trying to criticism for the board. And she said, you're still too much into the weeds. And I'm hearing Lauren say, please, God, don't help us. We built a task force and grabbed things as a board because the prior management company was falling apart.
Right.
We replaced Susanna with someone who's as good as her. We need to empower Lauren. We need to empower the new community manager. We've got Ariel to do their job, and the board needs to manage at a board level. And so it gets very dangerous when we start trying to help everywhere.
So let me summarize what I've heard and tell me if I'm incorrect. It sounds like we're really saying that we don't need to appoint a liaison to either of these two groups, the lawn sports or the pickleball task force. The task forces may be about ready to sunset as task forces and have some capacity now to work directly with management rather than with the board. Is that an accurate capture? Is that?
So we're not sunsetting the task forces yet.
Not yet.
Management will use them, engage them to the extent that they need
But
them.
we would not.
But we don't need a
But
liaison.
we would not, for the purposes of our meeting today, for organizational
That's fair.
purposes, we would not appoint a board member
Correct.
to be a liaison
Correct.
To either of those. And again, just to say it, none of us are SMEs when it comes to pickleball. And probably none of us are SMEs when it comes to lawn sports, although we've learned some things. I like this word SME. It reminds me of the guy in.
Have you
It's
spelled
funny,
it?
it's SME for
Just,
subject
so
matter.
at the end of all this, we've got pickleball courts and we've got croquet and all that good stuff. Where does the connection go to there? Does that thing go to Parks and Rec? I mean, are they?
Yes, well, what would typically happen is
In other words,
management would
Something
present.
happens and the players.
Yeah, management would present to
Yeah.
Parks and Rec.
Yeah, that's
And
correct.
and historically, that's the place that would make some of those recommendations. But ultimately, it's what Brian said earlier. The board makes the decision about
Yeah.
funding and financing and placement. And
Yeah.
these are political decisions at the end. And so I think we have to own them.
And really, I think the only thing that's left is, as regards both lawn sports and pickleball, is politics. I intend on staying involved with pickleball, deal with politics, and I probably will get myself more involved with lawn sports unless somebody tells me no to help deal with politics. Because but it really, the politics now, it needs to be at the board level. It's no longer at other levels.
So you're committing to writing them both off into the sunset?
It's like,
They're strange
I have a year left and I want them both resolved in the next year. Resolved means built or killed, whatever's gonna happen.
And resolve means you want to be on day one on each of those and learn how to do them. Is that what that means?
I've just spent the last.
I'll challenge you to pickleball.
Why would anybody else volunteer for this suicide mission?
All right, moving on, because I sense a problem. The next item on here is Garden Club, and
So can I talk about why Garden Club was here?
Yes,
yeah, sure.
please.
Garden Club as a question.
Yeah.
Should we have the Garden Club? I don't know if we're giving money to Garden Club or not. The question is,
So if I may,
please.
Garden Club came forward with a proposal for some affiliation with CROA, tiny funding. They were talking about, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000. We have not discussed it, so it shouldn't even be here. It should be when we discuss it, whether CROA wants to affiliate with the Garden Club, which is its own 501c3. So that's the question. I don't think we should be discussing it now.
I also have a meeting with the Garden Club next week, talking about kind of the project that I think is the nexus for this question.
Was that butterflies?
Not butterflies. There's also a tree project going on.
Oh,
So-
a tree. Yeah, okay.
So
So it's a work in progress. I don't think we need to discuss it as part of an organizational meeting, except it's setting a priority of when do we want to talk about it.
Does anybody object to that?
No, it sounds like
Is
this
that
is,
fair? Is that fair, Brian? To your point?
I'm happy with that.
it sounds
It
like
was
this
here
is a
to
good
have
use
that
case for you to start transitioning back to what we just talked about, right? Where they work with you, you bring that together with what you've learned and you bring it to us.
We don't want to be in the weeds.
Oh, that's bad. All right, bad.
Is that it? What was your word?
Yeah, that's.
That was a dad pun.
Okay. The next item, though, wasn't on our sheets, but just again adding, was ARC. This is obviously the Architectural Review Committee. Cindy, ARC meets how often?
I guess monthly.
Monthly.
That was Kevin.
Oh, it's Kevin.
Yeah.
And Kevin's up there. So, he can type in and say, no, it wasn't that. But ARC is, I don't know that it's a heavy time commitment on the part of the board liaison member. It is connecting with them. It's finding out changes and updates, things that they want to see done. Again, I would expect management to be more heavily involved now with ARC.
But it's also things that the board hears through our listenings that we would like the ARC to address. So it's a two-way communication. It's like, would you please consider revising X or doing Y?
And I would also just tell our new board members, there's something called the Board of Appeals. This is when a covenants or an ARC decision wants to be appealed by an owner. They have a statutory right to that. A quorum of the board of directors needs to meet to hear those appeals. That's once a month. And in the last year, we've had most of the board at every meeting. I don't know that that's always necessary. I think a quorum of 4 might be good, and rotating that around, it's another meeting, it's another period of time, but it's important time.
About an hour, half a dozen appeals.
Yeah.
On average.
Next, I just added legal because as an informal matter, the legal questions that have been presented to the board have grown, certainly in the last 3 years that I've participated in the board. I have a weekly update with our counsel, Tom Slayton of Larson & Associates. You're going to be meeting with him today, later. I think that there's value to having that information and then presented to the board in a confidential document that you can read and follow up and ask questions about. There's enough going on that it avoids the difficulty of something happening that has legal implications and the board isn't aware of it. So.
And my thought on this is that now that we have Lauren, who speaks the legalese.
Yes, she does.
Is this position necessary?
Good question.
I mean, because she's not part of those sessions, so then, she's getting, secondhand information, and it might be even more helpful to her if she could be in that initial thing, so she doesn't have to come back to Tom and say, okay, so you guys talked about this, I understand what you're saying, but did you consider this or that? So, I mean.
I'm not sure. The way it worked when we were on covenants, Gary would summarize a question from the group, and then I don't remember who was doing, talking to Tom separately, because I don't remember who the liaison was. But anyway, and that worked very well. And my only concern about Lauren is I can see situations where sometimes the legal question involves management. Right?
That's correct.
And then therefore,
it can. Hold on one second. Or did you?
Oh, no, I was just going to say the management liaisons for covenants and ARC and sometimes other committees do talk to Tom directly just to ask questions and expedite the process. And usually if it's a big question, I get CC'd on it. If it's a smaller question, it's just between them and Tom, and it just gets passed back to the committee.
So we have just a decision point here that I want to bring to the board. Gary's raised his hand, and I respect what Gary has to say before he ever says it. The question, however, is, are we going to allow public comment during this meeting today or not? And I think we need to be consistent. We're either going to do it or we're not going to do it. And I'd like to hear from the board as to what your feelings are about that.
I'll decline.
We'll save that question. Put it on the agenda to talk about how we're going to function and operate.
Well,
So,
and when we talk about this legal liaison, what Jackson is talking to Tom Slayton about is not minutia.
oh no, not very much.
So it's the higher level things. It won't affect, the covenants committee or ARC or whatever. These are things
this is
that.
litigation typically.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, but with Lauren now, who has she has her own law degree,
Yeah, she bought
And now
it.
that
She
Jack's
bought it just like me. Yeah. Brian?
People were worried if you were president, would other people speak up? I think we put that one to bed. I would actually like it to be Lauren. I mean, you evolve with what you have, but Lauren's a lawyer, which is a big advantage. As president, you're going to have a lot on your plate. And so, and I'd like the person who's dealing with Tom to actually be a lawyer. I mean, there's legal privilege, there's all kinds of stuff there that is an advantage. So I would like to take this one off the plate, let it be her. If there is an issue with management, you're the president. You can call Tom Slayton anytime you want.
Well, obviously she can recuse.
But she can recuse, but the president can reach out
Yeah.
to Tom Slayton, whatever the president wants, whoever is the president.
I'd agree with that. With routine briefings, if Lauren is so willing to have that be the lead. And there may be times that it needs to be the president and Lauren with Tom, just.
But I like getting the email. So I would
Yeah,
like
the-
Lauren.
The
still
summary
send
has been
the
very
email.
helpful.
It can be brief, it can be bullets, but
He's been doing a weekly
It's been-
summary of 10 key issues. And you'll learn about that.
And hopefully we'll get to a point where it won't have to be weekly.
That's right.
but I could be happy with, there were 7 items, no update, and here are 3, here are the update. I mean, let's keep
Right.
it simple, but still effective.
Taking something off your plate.
Is there any objection to that?
No.
Okay. All right. So I think at this point, we've covered what those assignments are. Now, if you go back to your detailed agendas, on the detailed agenda, the next item was, we've got the order in which we're going to do this. So let's take the first item, which is the appointment of, at this time, 2 CJC members with the notation of a third when that becomes necessary. So I think the way I'd like to do this is just to see by a show of hands, if you're interested in that position, let's find out who we're talking about.
I'd be interested in continuing.
I'd be interested in continuing.
All right, so we've got, okay, so right,
Alternate. I'll be the alternate.
so right now we've
You're gonna be the
got
chair.
Cindy and David and Jim
For what?
as-
This is CJC.
So the joint committee.
Oh, yeah, I'm in.
and Bill.
Sure.
As one of the 2 or as the third, when that position comes open?
Who's there now?
David and I.
Sandy and I are
And
there
and
now.
we'd like to stay.
I would like to stay for continuity.
So let me also say that the historical practice of the board has been that returning board members who want to stay in a role are typically given preference. That's not an absolute, but that's been the practice that we've followed. Sometimes makes new board members feel like they, getting the not exciting spots. I've been on both ends of that. And so I'd like to get a sense of what we want to do. There is a value to continuity and to the relationships that get formed. There's also value in having new set of eyes in some of these things. So I want to point out both of those sides.
If we have 4 people interested and we have 2 permanent seats and an alternate, I would prefer we do a silent vote again, because it becomes too hard to negotiate. And I don't think we're going to have that many where we have a conflict, but that way people can say, here's the 4 people, vote permanent, alternate, and let the board do it as a whole.
I do a subset of that. See who's interested in the permanent. If we need to do a vote, do that. If the permanent gets filled, then just do a vote for the alternate, if that makes sense.
If you're okay with the idea of the alternate, which is basically the third one that's going to come on when we get a third seat, which will be sometime during the year, you can have that.
Oh.
That's what you'd like.
Okay, good.
Voting.
Okay.
Okay.
So Cindy,
So
David,
Cindy and David are the permanent at this point, and
And Bill
Bill would be the third when we come on.
Thank you, Jim.
Next item is the appointment of Charter Committee Liaisons. The first of those on this agenda is ARC, so we're going to be jumping around your charts just a bit. ARC, again, if I'm hearing properly, my understanding is that we're saying we want to appoint just 1 member instead of a second or a backup. Is there any objection to that approach?
That sounds good.
Celia, you good with that?
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that.
Okay. So we are looking for an ARC representative.
I nominate Bill.
I do too.
Wow.
Don't ever
Bill
look
had to
down.
nominate himself.
That's a lesson learned. Thank you. I'll keep that.
What was the lesson that you're going to be?
Not to look down. The reading thing gets in your way all the time.
Did Bill volunteer?
No.
No, but
We
no.
nominated.
Everyone else stepped back and he wasn't paying attention.
Was that a yes?
That's a yes.
Because
Well, he's got
that's-
2 already. He's got 2 already. You can go home.
No, I have 1.5.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Okay.
Are we good? Anyone else? Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Next is covenants. The existing Covenants Liaison. Cindy, was that you?
Mhm, yeah.
Do you have an interest in remaining? in that?
Absolutely. They're my people.
Do we have anyone else that's got an interest in that? Thank you very much.
So you can go home. She's got two.
Finance, again, by the charter, this is the treasurer, so that is Brian. There. Thank you. Really moving through this.
Keep going.
Next is service areas. This had been my area. I am not anxious to keep it on now with the responsibility of president. So if there's someone else that would like to take this on, field is open.
Which one is it? Sorry.
Service areas.
Service areas. I'm going down the agenda, and so
Service areas is.
it's Artisan Park, Parkview.
What do you mean by Artisan Park?
Artisan Park as a whole is a service area.
So I should just like stay out of that service area. Seriously, I'm
Well-
being upfront.
Yeah, there is some potential conflict there, but it's really only when it deals with the hiring or the employment of your relative.
Right.
Everything else, I mean, I talked about Artisan, I live in Artisan. I mean, I don't think we have to recuse
I
ourselves.
think you said you were a homer for Artisan, didn't you?
Actually,
Didn't I hear that?
if we're perfectly honest, Celia is best suited for this. She deals with the public extremely well.
Get myself out of this.
Service area and condo counselor, both Celia.
Congratulations. Dan.
Thank you.
Celia, okay, congratulations, you win. All right. Much. Next on the agenda is the appointment of standing committee liaisons. And the first of those is dog park. That has been, David, you've been that.
I'm happy to continue
Anyone else?
unless someone else wants to have the canine role.
Thank you very much. Next is Parks and Recreation. This has been my liaison role. There's a part of me that would very much like to stay in Parks and Recreation, but I don't know if it's wise. I mean, given the amount of work. So I'm open to listening. Brian, you want to do Parks and Rec?
Since I said I would keep pickleball and lawn sports, I'll be happy to take Parks and Rec.
Anyone else
I think
want
that's
to
right.
throw themselves on that?
I think that's
Just a quick
Pyre?
question.
Yeah.
You know, this is the KPM thing.
Yeah.
Where does this go? Is this in Parks and Recreation?
No, the
This sort of stuff?
KPM thing is actually going to the board.
Oh, okay then.
We've come out of Parks and Rec at that point.
Okay.
So Brian has expressed an interest in Parks and Recreation. Anyone else?
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. And good luck.
They love dealing with me.
Special events. Celia's hand shoots up quickly. You have been,
Surprise.
do we have anyone else that's got a,
Well, she also was.
yes,
So
so yes, I just
the
want to make
difference.
sure.
I just.
Celia, thank you very much. Okay. Technology. So
Interested in being elevated from assistant to the liaison. I was a co-liaison,
you're co-liaison.
but if someone else wants it, happy to go there.
As VP, you provide political cover.
With what?
You provide political cover as VP, which is what Jim thought was important.
Yeah, and then there's some modest continuity, because again,
Yeah, exactly.
I was 1/4 briefed or 1/3 briefed.
Yes, absolutely.
Despite,
I think I'd be very happy with that.
So who's there?
David, technology.
unless someone else wants to be there.
That's your third. You okay with that?
What, say what you just said.
That's your
I'm
third.
Well,
Dog
committee
dog park
meets
is about the
every
smallest
quarter.
amount of work
I know, I'm
humanly
just saying,
possible.
I don't mind him taking 8. I'm just But he has 3.
All right, good. That then takes us, thank you, that takes us to appointment of community partner liaisons. The first is CCDD.
Good,
He's attended several other meetings.
good.
We're lobbying right now for the EV charging for them to get involved in that.
You're a logical person.
Talked to 4 out of the 5 at this point.
Now, just for the sake of stating it,
I will probably still go to some of their meetings.
Please.
But we have a person who would be the lead person is the person who would speak, who would deal with the board, who would be the coordination.
Yeah, I was your backup.
And other bums are welcome to go to meetings if they want to.
And frankly, given the number of meetings and workshops, sometimes that's a real necessity.
And I would expect when they actually have meetings specifically talking about incorporation, a number of us will
Yeah,
go.
I think that will involve many of us.
Yes.
Can we?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is part of this, but when we set up the calendar for the meetings for each committee, can we make sure that they don't fall on the same days? Like CCDD would always fall on Parks and Rec
All of
Committee.
your management liaisons have a full event calendar in front of them when you guys are setting meetings
I don't
for.
like
committees.
that idea.
No?
We have committees. Committees should meet when the committee people want to meet. We shouldn't be driving.
No, we're not driving them. They make the decision.
Yeah, but, and then let them make the decisions. I mean,
They can see the larger.
Debbie
calendar
is
design.
in special events and she does Parks and Rec sometimes and stuff like that too. I mean, if they, let them set their own calendars and stuff like
I
that.
Okay.
And if we have to move,
But
we
I'm
have to.
just saying to.
We're gonna get there.
Okay.
But we can't drive, we cannot drive that bus or we'll drive people off the committee.
I
That's what
I think, again, this is something that hopefully would go to management,
We'll
and
have
management, the other manager come. You have those
They can make their
discussions
decision.
I think
weekly about meetings and conflicts and stuff like that and make us aware. Is that accurate? Okay.
Okay. Next is Celebration Foundation. I know David has been the liaison to the foundation. I know we're putting a lot on your plate.
No,
You
but
want to continue?
they
that?
run themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm listening and I do a board report. Or,
Well, does someone else want it?
Is there anyone else that would
I
like?
mean, I would love to continue.
We'd like to have you.
Anything here.
I'd love to do it, but I'd love for David to continue more.
And if it becomes too
Well,
much, if it becomes too much,
Yeah,
and it has not been,
My challenge here, and my only challenge for the entire group is I want to make sure that we get everybody with a couple of things, because we
Yeah.
also need to round out board members. One of the frustrations Celia had last year was what the hell am I in charge of? I mean, we need to make sure people have got different things on their plate.
Yeah, I'm walking through the list
Okay.
here,
Yeah.
so we'll see.
The foundation is David, is what we're saying?
Condo Council is next. This has been Celia's.
Celia.
You willing to return
Oh,
to
yeah.
that?
This works for me because I've only got 1.5.
I only have one, so.
You got a reserve study coming up too.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll
get too
we'll
excited.
find
But that won't be work. That'll be fun.
The next on the agenda says others, schools, county, sheriff. I don't think there is a liaison. I think this is as needed when there's a reason to communicate.
I think, right.
And I don't, unless someone feels like we have to appoint somebody for that, I think that's,
You don't think it's a good idea for someone, the board to be on the school? or part of
Absolutely
the
not.
school? No, okay.
No, I'm sorry. The reason why is the only thing we're doing with the darn school board is negotiating this one contract. Otherwise, you're stepping, if you want to go, but I mean, otherwise you're stepping into a briar patch.
I think our relationship with them should be jointly with CCDD, and they would probably have the primary. So I'm glad to take any of those on as the CCDD liaison.
yeah, and I think the reality is when you've got a particular need, the board typically has said, or the president has said, would you go to, Cindy went, for example, to the school district meeting to talk about facilities with Brian. I think you can be more ad hoc based on the particular needs of the discussion. So I think having somebody, formal role is not as necessary. All right.
You're gonna be busy.
That is everything I see on that piece of the agenda. Am I missing anything? Is there anyone that feels deeply left out and would like to do more?
I showed David with 5 things.
I saw me with 4.
CJC, CCDD. Oh, you're not.
No, I'm not CTD.
No, Jimmy.
And some of these are much more time
I understand.
important.
Of course, I'll support him in whatever he needs for the technology committee.
Good.
I'm really excited because for the first time in
That's very
4
nice.
years, I'm not,
You're
liaison
not
for
even
any of
on
this.
here, Jackson.
I'm perfectly happy to
You
not
need to
do
pull
that.
your weight.
Yeah.
But
Cindy, you want something else?
Something else has already been taken, no. But, I would like to be, because there's
So
like,
which ones do I have?
Hold on, Cindy, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if we get to a point where we're talking about communications, and stuff, I would like to be included in those
Yeah, good.
talk. I mean, I'll be a,
I think on a couple things, like, I think we're gonna have a couple people.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Projects that
exactly.
think about it, so.
There'll be a number of projects throughout the year that management will be taking the lead on, but would need a board liaison just
Yeah.
to, for group consensus purposes.
And one of the issues that's been discussed over the years, and then I think it'll be on our agenda later, but safety and security. So there might be some board member taking the lead on facilitating with the sheriff, management. So I think there's going to be issues that come up.
Mhm.
So Bill,
That would be good.
stay
with-
tuned.
That
a
would be
floater.
good
Hmm?
with Jim. with
A floater.
A floater.
Let me ask you this. I do not have Brian's ability to go at long stretches of time, but he's leaving, as you see.
So
I'd like to suggest a 10-minute quick recess before we go to the next item on the agenda, which will be the board meeting structure for 2022, if that meets with your.
I
Totally
Just a
support
quick
that.
question. So what, I'm seeing I'm the alternate on on the CJC, and what else?
Well, you're going to pick up CJC and you've got ARC.
And your ARC.
ARC.
Oh, okay.
Is there any objection to taking a 10-minute recess?
No, I just forgot to write it down.
Then we come back for an hour.
I'll
Can you
send out a
take us
summary
offline for
document.
10 minutes? For those of you that are watching online, we're going to take a 10-minute, what Diana used to call a bio break. And we'll be back and reconvene at just a little bit after 10:35. Okay?
Got to hang up for there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh.
Don't look down, Bill.
Well, that's someone. Don't look down.
Don't look down. And make a t-shirt that says, don't look down.
We're live? Okay, we are live. Welcome back. We're calling ourselves back to order.
David.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. President. It won't happen.
Yeah, it'll happen all the time.
It'll happen again.
So I do want to, we've got everybody on live there. I do want to just make one quick editorial reference, which is that I understand that there's some commenting going on that this meeting was hard to find. We're going to do our best to make sure that all of these meetings are accessible and that people can find them. Nonetheless, this meeting was properly noticed. It was posted. It was put up on the website. It was put in the Friday Flash. And I would prefer, and I know that every member of this board wants to make sure that we communicate and over-communicate and communicate again. There is zero effort to hide any of this from anyone. And in addition, you have the right to come down here and be part of the voluminous gallery that we have today.
And even have coffee and dessert.
Absolutely. So we are glad you're here. We're glad you're with us online. We're glad if you're watching this as a recorded meeting, and we will continue to impress upon management the importance of making all of that accessible. But we are gonna tell the truth on this board, as we have always, and we are going to call out untruths. When somebody says this meeting wasn't properly noticed, that's untrue.
It's not true.
Okay, now moving on. The next item on the agenda is the board meeting structure for 2022. Just to overview, what we're trying to get at is the way that we're going to work, our frequency of meetings, workshops versus regular board meetings, the timing, how long these meetings should go for, the rules about looking down, Bill, the guidelines for resident comments, how do we want to function? And these are things that I think we need to lay out, be clear about for the benefit of ourselves as the board, for management, but also for the community. I don't think it's fair to say to community members, well, the rules are X, but we just changed the rules to Y and they didn't know. And so they're caught without knowing that. So I'm going to open up this conversation. We've got those 4 items there. I want to start with meeting frequency, but that really goes to the question of board meetings versus workshops. And the question, and let me just set the table here. What we have done in the last 6 months or so is to go to 2 formal board meetings a month. They have been capped at 2 hours and no workshops. Prior to that, we had 1 or 2 board meetings plus 1 or 2 workshops. That really becomes an extraordinary amount of work, and it was because we were in the weeds. So now as we try to pull back to a more professional level of management, I think that should inform our conversation. So sorry with that, Bill,
What's the difference?
The difference, it's a great question. The difference between a workshop and a board meeting is that a board meeting, we conduct business, we approve expenditures, we vote on items dealing with management and the community. In a workshop, typically we're trying to gather information and we're more interactive, a little less formal. And historically, when we had workshops, the community was invited to participate through those. I'll just say, having sat in your very seat, that it was very frustrating to me in board meetings to have both public comment at the beginning and then public comment in the middle of the board meeting and still trying to get our work done in 2 hours. I want to hear from the public, but frankly, when it's time for us to make a decision, we need to have the space to do that. So that's my personal view, Brian.
Okay, so let me give a little history here because I've been here for 4 years. David's been here for 5. Jackson's been here 3-4 years. So we have done many different things. And let's just talk about the election cycle and comments there. You know, morning meetings don't work. No one can attend, no one can watch. So we got in a lot of trouble there. We're not going to go to weekend meetings. Weekend, you know, you have a meeting, you need management here. Management's already working their butts off 5 days a week. And if you have a Saturday morning meeting, well, everybody's going to take their kids to Little League and the soccer and stuff like that. You're not going to get participation. We went to 2 board meetings a month because we could conduct business. We said then we would firmly do 6 to 8. You've seen in the last 2 or 3 meetings where I
pulled stuff right from the agenda. And the reason we did that is because the problem you have is if you have one business meeting a month where you can actually conduct business, you need to get business done. There are some things that are time sensitive. If we said, I'm making this up a little, if we said every month meeting was going to be on the 10th or the 24th, you've got about 2 weeks between meetings. You can, your worst case scenario is you didn't get something on the 10th, you can deal with it on the 24th. People can get used to it on 6 to 8. We tape everything, we record everything. We now put it on system fast as the dickens. Regardless of the nonsense you may be hearing online, we make everything available to people. We respond to comments. We will do everything we can, which is why we went to this twice a month meeting model. You can argue about whether you want comments just before, during, I can live with either answer there. But that is the reason we went to that model, because it was the most reactive to allowing public participation and being able to have a time span that works.
The only other historical piece is 2 years ago this month, we went to Zoom. The community discovered, the world discovered Zoom because of the pandemic. And then we morphed into 2 meetings a month. In my earliest days, we had 1 board meeting for business and maybe 1 board workshop, maybe. So we probably had 8 or 9 workshops over the course of a year that had 2 or 3 topics. But the idea of, and then the other thing is, as long as we notice the meeting, we can do business at a workshop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can pass something. So it's just a matter of how do we want to operate.
I think what happened to us last year with the amount of workshops we had is because we were in the process of the RFP.
Yeah.
So that added,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
that just added everything to our.
Sucked a lot of time out.
Yeah.
Going even further back, just on the gaps here, they used to do their workshop and the meeting in one day. So the workshop would start at 9 o'clock and would go to 10, 12, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then the meeting would start at 6:30 or whatever. And during that workshop, all the minutia would be discussed. That's where all the discussion would happen. So then the board meeting was boom, 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 boom. Well, one of the board members said, this is not good, because at that time the workshop wasn't filmed, but we usually have a dozen people there. But to those who were at the actual board meeting, it looked like the board was rubber stamping everything.
Yeah.
So that's when we decided to, start actually having discussion at the meetings themselves. I agree with Jackson that, although you want to give people an opportunity to speak, I don't think during the topic of the agenda is a good thing necessarily. Because then it does start other conversations and it lengthens the meetings if you're trying to keep it under 2 hours, but still we need to give residents some avenue to give their opinions on things. So.
David?
So as we move forward, what I would, in the spirit of what has been said in the prior hour, I would like for us to be engaging more with the professional companies, professional leadership we have with Lauren and her team, and we as a board be more operating at that higher level, not in the weeds. What I would envision us moving towards, and I don't know that that's this month, but moving towards 1 board meeting a month that is time limited, because I do not believe in having even though today, I know it's 1 day a year, but having a full day of meetings, I don't believe in that. I think we need to be focused in our time and our energy, and, we're efficient with that. We've all done our homework ahead of time. So I would like us to move towards that, but also find ways that we can go deep on certain topics. Let's spend a half hour on this or 45 minutes on that.
So are you suggesting that we have selected workshops?
Yes, I am. At some point, I don't know.
Rather than saying every month there's going to be a workshop, whether we got anything to talk about.
No, as needed. We may need to spend a half hour on legal and 45 minutes on the croquet design or lawn sports.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go deep on that.
Let me ask you, Lauren, do we have, in your view and Susanna's view, can we get our work done in 1 2-hour board meeting that is built just around the decision points, the action items, or do we need 2 board meetings a month?
I think at this point, I would request to retain the 2 board meetings a month to get through some of the backlog things that we have coming up and readdress maybe a little later in the year, and we can cut back on board meetings and reintroduce the workshop topic
That's where I would,
to dig deeper into other things that are coming up down the pipe.
I would do that.
Right?
You got comments?
For now, because we're trying to get through all the community inventory and get a lot of things pushed through operationally, 2 board meetings is good because that stuff kind of comes up common. But at some point, I think you can scale back into kind of what David's format was.
And David knows that I disagree with him. I consider that a pipe dream. We now have $7, $8, $9 million of annual revenue. Another 1,000 homes coming on, another 300 apartments. We're, for better and for worse, a growing community. And then throw in incorporation and everything else that's going to come at us. I think it's unrealistic. I very much like the 2-hour max concept, because I just think it's where CROA is evolving.
Twice a month.
I hate to set unrealistic expectations. And I think management can do the best job in the world. There's still a lot of stuff coming here.
Bill or Jim, I know you haven't had the fun of doing this, but having observed from the outside, do you have any comments or thoughts about that structure?
I think we should give it a try.
Give it a try of 2 meetings.
I think the challenge of the workshop, speaking, as I said I would, for residents who have families and kids, is they can't attend those. They're
Are
too
you
long.
talking about workshops? You're talking about meetings?
No, traditional workshops. I think that was a problem. I found it challenging when I needed to attend it as the chairman of the technology committee. And I think a lot of people who work would do that, would find that challenging. I like the fact that they're in the evenings. I think 2 a month helps with that a lot. I do think that we need to have other ways to get direct input from the community. I really liked what Cindy said in her remarks. Yes, thank you. Speech at the beginning of her remarks about having these open forums that aren't about us getting business done, but about us communicating
What's going on?
with the community and answering questions. I don't know what form that takes, but again, those are the things that I think we should spend more time on at the beginning of the year, and hopefully as we get a little bit more support and the community feels heard, then we can tailor those down. But I would say I am good with 2 a month, but it needs to be plus. You know, as any of you have done events at Disney, it's that dollar amount plus, right? This needs to be a plus year for us in terms of communication. And so that's my suggestion. If we can, I don't know when we would deal with that in our business, but.
Well, it's been suggested that we do town halls or we do Q&As. They could be Q&As around specific topics. They might be open-ended. We've done that in the past at various times. I think you're right that probably the preeminent need we have is to communicate and over-communicate and to reach out and to rebuild the trust in the community that we are not trying to hide anything. There's just a lot going on. To Brian's comment, you know, we're an HOA that's really tasked with trying to run a pretty good sized city. And it's always beyond our reach and beyond our real responsibility, and yet we're tasked with doing it. So I think we've got to balance those 2 things.
So while we're talking about communication, besides the board meetings, last year I did it pretty religiously, except for when it rained during Food Truck Friday, having the residents come sign up for the Friday Flash. Maybe there's something we can, besides the Friday Flash, add to that under the tent.
Yeah, and this is one of the things we're going to talk about. We've got it further down on the list.
Right.
I just want to get the context of our meeting structure. I think it's important to recognize, and again, my style will be to try and reflect back, and you tell me if I'm mishearing, because I wear hearing aids. But in my view, in what I'm hearing you say is 2 board meetings a month, with some extra either workshop, Q&A opportunities to hear from the community specifically, where that's our primary purpose, is to listen and engage. But that for the board meetings themselves, our primary task is to do the business of the board, to be able to have prepared, to have done our board work, come in and work through those meetings. David?
90% on target.
Okay, that's pretty good.
What I
It's
was,
a low A. I'm taking it.
because there's one piece that you said early on that was not in your summary, but just to summarize, 2 meetings a month for business, a workshop as needed, and then I would differentiate, what do you call it, town hall meetings from a workshop.
Yeah.
So to be clear that there would be 3 types of things. And then the piece that wasn't addressed was, how do you engage residents while keeping the meeting flow and focusing on business going? So we do have resident comments at the beginning. We've morphed into residents' comments.
Right. So we just let me address that piece, because that one piece I think is a elephant in the room to some extent. Very difficult, and I have great respect. You've sat in this chair. You've sat in this chair. It is very difficult to have resident comments at the beginning and not want to engage with those comments, because sometimes it just cries out for engagement. And yet, under the statute, the meeting has not begun. The meeting has not happened. We are not called into order even at that point.
Right.
And so there is a statutory right for every member of the association to have 3 minutes, a minimum or maximum, if we choose, of 3 minutes of conversation. And that's important. I'm just going to say right now that my personal preference is that we allow those 3 minutes. We listen carefully and respectfully. We time it out, and at 3 minutes, the time is up. And that we then thank the resident for their comments. We note that management has made note of that, and we do not comment as a board at that time. Now, if there's something later on our agenda or in the board comments, then we're welcome to do that. But I am going to be inclined to not want to engage in that part of the conversation. I want to hear from residents, and I want their comments to be there. I know that some residents feel not heard because we don't engage with their comments, but that is not the point of that time. Then my suggestion would be that in the board meeting, we do not invite public comment. We simply do our work. If we're in the workshop, the town hall, the Q&A, then it is completely flipped. We want those comments. So that would be my preference, right?
Okay, now let me come back with a counter argument. And I will agree with whatever the board wants to do, and the president certainly gets a strong inclination toward the lead here. If you look, and by the way, I like the model that we had before because I put it in place as president. Beginning comments, we probably have no more than 1 or 2 speakers at the beginning of a board meeting, almost every single meeting. Speakers during a board meeting itself, probably Gary speaks as much as anybody, and Gary will speak for a minute. I thought the Little League guy, when he got up there, actually added value to our conversation. So when you take this away, you're taking away something where a resident feels they communicate with the board. If you're going to, and it can be taken away, but then you got to ask yourself, how are you going to let stuff be communicated so you get a better answer? Because I think in the case of the Little League one, we had that, but then I ended up going to meet with Alec, went through the whole meeting there, sent an email to everybody. I've got more follow-up materials. I was waiting on a new board and stuff like that. There's counterbalances here. That's my only argument. I'll do whatever the board wants. I don't
think there's anything that would make it impossible for the president or another member of the board to say, I'd like to hear from a member of the audience on this particular topic if it was a subject matter expert, right? Which the Little League people were. The problem for me is that the board has an extraordinary amount of business to do. And I think back to the time when David was president of the board and we put time limits on the conversations. I mean, they were literally on the agenda and it said, right, am I remembering that correctly? You got 20 minutes to get through this. You had your own clock ticking and you said, that's it, we're done. There is, I think, a need to continue to move expeditiously through our work. And I'm not sure at that point that the public comment, when we are at an action point, is going to make a significant amount of difference. We should have already gotten that feedback and information long before we've reached the decision point, in my view. But if the board feels differently, we need to talk about that. Yeah.
I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I'm not even sure that the Florida statute allows to suggest that you have resident comments during the business part of the meeting.
They're silent
Okay.
on that question. Then I say
Right.
residents are silent.
And, my feeling is, if it's already gotten to us, then, like you said, it's almost moot because all the work's been done. We've seen what's been presented. We have to figure out a way that if people have a strong opinion about something, then they go to whatever committee meeting
Right.
is
That's a good point.
discussing that
That's a good.
and take a part in that. Yes, sir.
And as we try to become more professional, and as we try to become more, less in the weeds and more high level, we just don't have the ability to do our work in real time with engaging back and forth. In my view, it's just hard to do that. And I think that the pressure that puts on the board is not always conducive to the best decision making. So I'm not trying to shut anybody down from making comments at all. I welcome those comments. But I think that if we say, to your point, we're going to do a Q&A, we're going to do a town hall, we are going to come together and the purpose is for you to talk and us to listen, then I think we are generating that opportunity in a better, more conducive environment than any formal board meeting. So my recommendation would be that the formal board meeting does not allow community comment from the moment that the agenda has been and the meeting's been called to order, but that prior to that, we offer people the opportunity to comment.
Right, and I understand the comment part, but I wasn't clear. It seems if we allow somebody to make a comment, they deserve an answer, and when do they get?
Well, they don't deserve an answer under statute.
Right.
Okay, so the problem is that someone makes a comment and they expect a response from us. And maybe it's something we've never heard about before. Maybe it's something, there's a problem on my street and so on and so forth. It doesn't require a comment from the board to engage, except to say thank you, and we've given this to management and they've heard it and they're going to work on it.
And I consider that a response.
But what I don't want, and what has happened, and I'm not calling anybody out here, but we have had situations in which residents have gotten the microphone, literally or in technology, and they won't give it up. And 3 minutes becomes 5, becomes 10, becomes a soliloquy, becomes a dialogue, becomes a debate, becomes a list of grievances, all of which may be valid and viable and necessary, but not at the appropriate time and place. And that's what I think, given our needs, there was a great in this campaign about shortening board meetings. I think one of the ways you do that is you make sure that when you come to the board meeting, A, the board members are prepared, and I'm sure that every member of this board will be prepared. And B, that we stay to the business at hand. And public comments are important, but they are not the business at hand. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
We just take a roll call of board members.
I do want to make a comment. So, having had to run meetings, it is very challenging to stay within that. When even comments from the board, right? You can't predict those. I do think it is best to not have comment during, but if we're going to take that away, I think we should perhaps set aside some time at the end, whether it's a part of the formal meeting or not, to get the feedback, because oftentimes when you speak at the beginning, you can't speak to what the actual business that happened, right? Yeah. So I would do that. I would also say that we should, given what we've talked about, be very clear as to which committee may be having meetings and discussing in deeper detail the topics that we're going over, the ones that are for discussion, not for action, and let them know when those meetings are during our meeting, right? And then potentially too, there's another concept of when you're teaching and you're trying to stay on task with certain area of a parking lot. Someone, you're talking about Word and someone asks an Excel question, just to be very simplistic about it. You go, okay, well, we can deal with that after class, or, we can have a follow-up meeting with you or whatever. And so I think we should be very clear that they're heard, and here's ways that you can continue being involved in this topic and get more information and potentially give input in these other avenues. So I think we need to be very, like you said, over communicate, think about that for people. We want people to become involved, not just in the board meeting, but in everything that's around it, which potentially is committee meetings, which potentially is saying this is something that needs more discussion, and we agree to it and say, when we have the next town hall, or we will have a special workshop on this or whatever, we need to be prepared, I think, to the sense that we're encouraging involvement, even as we're potentially limiting some comment in the actual meeting.
I'm going to take one more comment and then we'll go to a motion and a vote. David?
Yeah, and my comment will lead us to a motion, to Brian's point. Synthesizing all of this, I think there's three things tugging at us. We want to have respect for the board and our time limits. Second, we want respect for the decision-making process. So we're going to have an action item or even a discussion item that may have already been vetted by the Parks and Rec Committee, by management. And so the squeaky wheel at the last minute was frankly out of order because we've had a long process of already engagement. And hopefully whatever processes we've set up have already provided multiple opportunities. Third, we want respect for resident engagement. So my proposal would be, and this is a la, so it's a shift from what, so the proposal I'm going to make as a motion is that for the largest extent, our board meetings are time limited and are focused on business at hand. Of course, there's the public comment at the beginning. But there may be, as Brian had inserted, a distinction between the business items and the discussion items. So when the board agenda is built, they're based on how large the agenda is, knowing how long we have total and guessing how many resident comments there will be. And sometimes I actually had maybe 10. I remember times that happened at the beginning. Say we're going to allocate X amount of time. We're going to have 15 minutes total for discussion on this topic. So the agenda would be some items. So the motion is we honor our time limits. There may be one or two items that we clearly label as discussion, and we have time limits, but then we have business so that we can manage it.
I'd like to clarify a little bit. I'm a little lost here.
Okay.
First of all, I want to get to the number of meetings we're going to have. And
Okay.
then the second part of your comment that I'm not clear on is, are you saying residents should comment during those discussion items?
Yeah, so if we have a discussion item, we're going to only spend 15 minutes. That's,
What if 14 of those 15 minutes are spent with resident comments?
no, we start with the board, and then whatever time is left, we have residents, and then we're done with the comments. But then we may say, well, we can't take action on that because there's still too much stuff that needs to be talked about. But at least we open the air on talking about this topic or that topic.
I'm reading a lot of body language that suggests that that's not,
Okay, that's fine.
people aren't loving that.
Just try to put that out.
Well, I'm just thinking, that the agenda should be the action items first. And then if there's any time left in the 2 hours or whatever,
That's
then you
another way
have
of
the
doing it.
discussion items.
That's another way of doing it.
And I don't think anything should be timed, because I've seen a couple of things that just came recently with the lawn sports and the kickball that I think is going to take a long
More
time.
than 5 minutes.
Absolutely. And that may be,
So you're suggesting go the action items first.
absolutely, and then
Okay.
discussion items.
And then
And then
there's
if there's something, and the other thing I
Okay.
want to know is, at what point do we decide there's been enough discussion on this that we need to have another meeting where we can really dig in?
like a workshop.
Exactly.
Okay.
At what point does that happen? When you get this piece of paper, like we say, no, we don't want this on the agenda. We want a workshop, maybe just a half an hour, 45 minutes, but we need to really dig into this. That's my opinion.
I think it will be a huge mistake if the headline at the end of the day on Facebook is that the board is doing everything it can to constrict communication. And you can say you're not doing that, that's how that's gonna play out. So, we all know the joke about tyrant, but the reason that happens is we have to give the president a lot of latitude. I was boom, 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 boom. You all understood it, you all laughed about it, but you understood the rules. And we've got to respect and give the president that. I actually like flipping the action items with the discussion items. My vote would be to allow up front, though, it can only be a discussion. If there's an owner's comment up front, it's only on item that's not on the discussion items then, and then let somebody talk. Don't give them 3 minutes, give them 2 minutes. And then be very strict as to how you manage your time. I mean, as long as we have rules and they're published, I'm fine with that. They ought to be able to make a crisp comment. But I just wanted, this whole election was about communication. So if our first action is to kill communication, God help us, there'll be a revolt and a call for a new president. I mean, we don't want to put ourselves in that position on day one. Let's at least wait till day 3.
2 hours, ladies and gentlemen.
Because, I'm sorry, let me just go one more time, because we got 3 people here, we got 5 or 6 people up here. We haven't let them speak, but those 3 I've seen at every meeting forever. I recognize several names up there who come to meetings. These people have intelligent comments, so I don't even like when we have meetings and we don't allow them. I mean, we want to let them speak, tell them they got 1 minute. They can be crisp, but I feel anybody who's willing to listen to us for 2.5 hours deserves the right to speak.
Anybody that comes to a meeting deserves the right to, they're actually coming to a meeting or being there.
So it's the motion, keep the time limits.
Well, so here's what I would like to hear as a motion, that we have 2 board meetings a month that are formal board meetings, that as part of those, we stay time limited, we deal with the action items first, that we have discussion, and in the discussion, we allow resident comments in that discussion period.
Time limited.
Time limited. And that we also then add workshops and town hall Q&As on an as-needed basis. With the desire to improve and engage communication. So that would be the motion that the chair would entertain.
So
I need somebody to say so moved.
Second.
now I need clarification. So we're running through the action items. Are you saying that we will allow discussion by the community on those action items, or strictly the ones
Just
that
ones
are
that are
up for
for discussion.
discussion?
By the time something comes for an action item, it is
Exactly.
processed through management and committees,
Right.
and the board has decided, has looked at their board books, and it's too
done.
late.
Well, and that'll allow us to zip through those, so we will have more
Most of the time, we handle those very quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot of pro forma work that we just, here's the report and we go.
Yep.
Because that is our business, right? And we should do our business
Let's
first.
get our business
I
done.
like the idea, that's great. We should also prioritize the discussion items so that we can do what you have done informally last
Well,
couple
let
of
me just
meetings, which
say-
is push the ones that aren't as
And
important
then
to
we
the
give
next meeting.
maximum flexibility to the
Yeah.
president. Let's
Yeah.
also give the president good cover. We all understand we're asking the president to be very crisp. We get into discussion items to move it forward.
But we're identifying the items that we plan to discuss at that point. So we're going to discuss X and Y, and if there's time, we'll do Z.
And I think, in all honesty, I was guilty of trying to get too much on the agenda. I think we need to be more honest about how much you can get on the agenda.
If you're meeting twice a month, the next meeting is 2 or 3 weeks later.
Okay. I'm going to call the vote. We'll do it as a roll call. Brian?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
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 And I'm a yes, so.
Can I make one more motion?
You may.
For the rest of this meeting, I would make a motion that we allow the audience to participate for a 1-minute
I'll
speaking
second.
span on the topic if they want to,
For the rest of this meeting.
for the rest of this meeting.
Second.
He second.
Oh, did you second? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And that can be both online, and Susanna and Lauren can monitor that somehow.
I am not going to know from where I'm sitting,
I'm
so.
monitoring it.
It's their job to monitor.
Okay. All right. Do we have, there are comments. We're going to limit, and remember that motion was 1 minute to comment. Let's talk about, I guess we need to actually get on the schedule now, don't we? Look at our schedules for,
Can we just ask management to let's pick a day if it's gonna be Wednesdays or whatever day, I don't care, and just ask management to put together a calendar and send it around online. If we gotta move a date or two, we will, but let's just, for the rest of 2022, and then we'll worry about 2023 with that later in the year.
And the history has been Wednesday, the fourth Wednesday of the month.
Yeah, and just
But if
to
we're
let
having
the,
two, it's gotta be like a
But now
second.
we go back to the second and fourth.
If Wednesday works for Jim and Bill.
But look at holidays, et cetera.
yeah.
Do you also want to keep your appeal meetings where they've always been Wednesday?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Do you also want to keep your appeal meetings on the first Wednesday of every month
Yep.
at 5?
On the first, how about adjacent to the first board meeting of
That's a
every
good
month?
idea.
Because otherwise you have 3 Wednesday nights,
Okay, so you
Just
want to
a-
make
just
it
an idea.
the 5 o'clock before the first board
just an
meeting?
idea, or 4:30 if we need to.
Okay,
Yeah, I like that idea.
okay.
Just for the community's information, the next scheduled board meeting is Wednesday night, March 9th. And that has been on the agenda. So that's the only board meeting date that was set at this time.
And that happens to be the second Wednesday of this month.
Correct, that would be nice.
I'd like to just empower management to put together a calendar for the year
Yeah.
and everybody respond via email. Everybody has to use their community town hall email, just so everybody's aware.
Well, and then also, as you're putting together the calendar, if you see that it's a religious thing, then I think that should be addressed as soon as they're making the calendar. And then we need to decide, are we going to move the meeting to a Tuesday or a Thursday to accommodate those folks like that, and especially the annual meeting.
We
So
will
it
use our
doesn't,
best judgment.
yeah, so it doesn't fall on Ash Wednesday when people are supposed to be, Catholics are supposed to be fasting and not party.
I don't think it's going to fall like that for none.
Well, but I'm just saying, but I mean, there's things like that that fall out
Yeah.
through the year, you know, Ramadan and, you know, all those kinds of things.
And we had
Addressed
that
immediately.
with the Jewish holiday
Yeah.
when we were supposed to.
And then we won't run into, we changed it at the last minute.
We will
Okay.
use our best judgment.
I think, yeah,
Hey,
let's put, yeah, good.
You lost that privilege.
That's why I look at him.
Yeah, and you got no vision problems now, so you see everything.
What? Didn't fix my hearing.
Serious. That's why he went like this and he didn't say, move on. He just went like this.
On my agenda, that covers board meeting structure for 2022. Is there anything else to add to that agenda item?
No, nicely done.
Very
All right. Next on your detailed agenda, activities and initiatives to manage in March through June 30th. Where to start with this? It's, first of all, let me just say to the community, to the public, that we have probably something on the order of 30 or 40 topics and initiatives that we have here, some of which are in the next 3 or 4 months. That's the first group of items that have been identified. And then we have some longer term priorities for 2022. As management has come up to speed and Lauren's put together her staff and done certain things, I know that there are inputs that we are looking for from you as to direction and priority. I think some of these things, historically, the board has been very involved with, that we would perhaps now start to back out of and say, we're waiting for management to tell us where we can assist. What we wanted to do today, and I'm speaking now, Brian really put this together, and so we're playing ventriloquist here. I'm going to try and figure out what was in his brain.
Do you want to sit here so you can put?
Oh, he desperate. So if I'm misstating it, stop me, please, okay? But I think that part of what we're trying to do now is to say as a board, what are the primary focus that we need to have in order to transition to this new professional model, I'm going to call it, of board management? What is most important to us? What do we have to deal with in the next 3 or 4 months? And what do we want to look at more long-term? And so this conversation is not so much a fixed item as just saying, we want to walk through some of these priorities for all of the board and for the community to hear what we think is important. Is that a fair statement of what you had in mind?
Yeah, and some of this is educational. Some of it is, okay, as we talk about it, how fast do we want to address this issue? Take the first one as an example, I will.
Before you go, just I think that it's a matter of, particularly for the 2 new board members, already you're experiencing may experience the fire hose, drinking from the fire
I
hose.
was just gonna say.
So it's a matter of getting the big picture and prioritizing. What can wait till September to talk about? What do we need to talk about this month? So there's some general distinctions here, like through June 30th. And I think the other piece is some of these may then translate to, like Bill or Jim or Cindy may say, I'd like to work with management, work with a couple people, and then come back to the board. I'd like to take the lead and talk about X or Y.
And let me just say, we've got 20 minutes on our schedule until 11:30. Tom Slayton comes in to do the board training. So we're not going to get through all of this.
And we can come back at 3
We are
o'clock.
coming back,
Let me take the first item.
please.
First item is board, committee, and partner program operating principles. What we have experienced as a board in the last year is too damn much bullying. We've had bullying via Facebook. We've had bullying from committees. It has become the principle of this community that if you want something, you do bullying. So I'm not trying to pull any punches, and I took this off of Jackson for we have a couple of partner programs who either need to stop bullying or else need to cease to be partner programs. We elect a board. By golly gee whiz, Celia got the most votes. And that was not supposed to happen because of bullying. And so basically what we're going to do, what we're saying with this first one is we as a board are going to sit here and set standards for what the board should be doing, what the committee should be doing, and what a partner program should be doing. And you need to play by, and I'm going to insist that committees and partner programs have a code of conduct. And if you can't play by the code of conduct, God bless you, go have fun somewhere else. But it is time now to stop the bullying nonsense because it is destroying this community. And I'm trying to be subtle with what I'm saying here.
Yeah, very subtle.
So with that, I think there's actually 3 separate sets of operating principles. How do we as a board want to function? And then the 2 points about committees and partner programs. We need to redefine those. Partner programs have a contract. I know that when Lauren came on, she looked at contracts in general. It's like, oh, these need to be reworked. So code of conduct, contracts, and then for the board, one of the things we as a prior board came up with, and I'm happy to remind everyone, but we never verified it, is how do we want to operate so that we stay at the higher level and so that we as a board can attract other people who want to be at the professional level of the board.
And I would just say I would appreciate a code of conduct or just kind of guiding principles, especially for the committees, because my management staff has taken a lot of unnecessary dragging through the mud and over getting the bus run over them.
Yeah.
So.
And one thing I would like to add to that is I think we need to redefine what a committee is. David and I, for example, when they formed a board meeting, had emails this week, and the person was being very nice, but that person thought the Recreation Committee had responsibilities that neither one of us thought the Recreation Committee even had. So we've had a situation where some of these committees have been in existence since forever. And what was written on a cocktail napkin in 2002 is no longer relevant. So what is this committee responsible for actually, and what is the board versus management responsible for? And I very much would like to see us protect management from abuse from some of this stuff.
Let me separate, and I'll come to you, Cindy. Let me separate, there are 3 different things that are going on here. We're talking about the board itself, we're talking about committees, and then we're talking about partner programs. And really, this first action item was to have operating principles. Sometimes we call that a code of conduct. I resisted the idea of a formal code of conduct because under Florida statute, there really was no teeth to it. And if you have a document that has no enforcement provision, it's kind of a worthless document. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be operating principles. David has undertaken to draft some of those principles. I'm going to ask you, David, to circulate those to the board, and then we'll put them out into the community as well. These would be principles for the board first, but they could be applicable to committees and to partner programs. And I think that they have value for that purpose. What I think is important to explain is that you cannot weaponize these documents to say X person violated the code of conduct and can be removed. There is no such enforcement for the board level because we're governed by Florida state statute. We could, I suppose, choose to do that at the committee or the partner program level.
Right.
And that is a discussion that we will have in public after we've seen a document, but I think we need to see that document and understand it. So let me go to Cindy and then I'll come to Jim.
I think that one of the things that we need to do with the committees is, at one point, we used to have objectives for those committees.
We have that.
Very,
We still have that
very
this year.
specific.
We have that.
I think
We
they're.
approved them last spring.
Well, no. You're talking about the resolution. But within the resolution, there was a section called goals and objectives, but it was very specific.
We have that this year.
I would say this, Cindy, the goals and objectives is important, but it's not what this particular action item is about, which is
Okay.
really about a
But,
conduct.
so.
So can we hold that till, I'm going to use his parking lot
That was just
example.
one of the three things I wanted to say. So I also think that.
Secondly, on the parking lot. Go ahead.
That committee members should get copies of all this that they could have. So
Absolutely.
they have it. And I do think that in there should be a provision, because I was, one of, she said that her people are getting beat up. I was at one of those meetings, and the person who was doing the beating up was in a position that he should not have been doing that. And I think there should be a provision in there that says that if
Yes.
the liaison witnesses something like that, then you can be removed from that position.
Yeah.
And somebody else will take it.
Should be.
Not thrown off the committee, but taken
Yes.
from that
And
position of authority.
I hear that, and I think that's part of what David is trying to draft, and that we'll all have a chance to look at. I said Jim, and then I'll go to Celia. Thank you.
Just the point, for obvious reasons, you said the legality, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's important, especially in the time that we're at now, that those go out and we show our integrity through stating that those principles, and that the residents know that we are committed to those as personally. So it's not a legal thing. It's not like we're going to be thrown in jail if we do it.
Right.
But personally, these are the things that we believe in, and then the standards that we should live by while we are on the board.
I agree. Celia?
Okay, so what we're talking about is when you take on the role as a committee member, you need to respect the board members, the board of directors. And if you, am I explaining it correctly?
That would be part of it.
If you cross the line and communicate to a board member, it should be where you're removed from the committee. If you're sending threatening messages or anything like that, you have a responsibility as a committee member for the best interest of Celebration, not to be criticizing management, not to be yelling at management, not to be yelling at a board member.
Thank you.
So
David?
to move this along, just to be clear, what I drafted was about the board. We're talking about statute, code of conduct, not enforceable. So what I will do is the next step for the board only, when I say board only, relevant for the board members, is take the prior code of conduct and these principles, blend them together, and then we can have a discussion. The other issue of partner programs and committee and what should be maybe one of those discussion topics that we start the ball rolling at the next or the following board meeting, just to help move that forward. What are the issues? And maybe there's a process, maybe Lauren has a process suggested about how do we build that code, which is not under Florida statute.
Correct. Brian?
Okay, and that's fine. When we form committees, which we do every year in the spring, we already have a resolution for every single.
Right.
We ought to just take the prior resolution and strengthen it a little.
Yes.
And then what I would like us to do as a board is have a discussion around a partner program code of conduct that should go in all future code type things. So I think there's a board conversation, which I think is needed. We clearly heard that in the last 6 weeks. I think we've already got the resolutions for the committees, which we ought to start just charge somebody with doing a review. I think you're in charge of committees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever it is. And then we'll, on the partner programs, we ought to have a separate conversation so that makes all future contracts.
And I think we can task management with helping us to create those documents. I would prefer that we stop calling this thing a code of conduct. Code of conduct is a legal term and it does not have any application here. Operating principles is what we're talking about. There is no code of conduct for a committee or a partner program. Those are governed, for a partner program, it's governed under the contract we have with the partner. For the committee, it's part of the resolution that Brian was talking about.
Yeah.
And that's where it should be, as part of that enabling resolution.
So if you're talking about a partner program, what would the area be called legally? I'm not arguing.
It would be the operating principles part of the contract itself.
Standards.
When you sign this contract, you agree to these standards of behavior.
Standards of behavior.
Okay,
Yeah, am I correct, Lauren?
Yeah, I would do like an Exhibit C operating principles.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I'm, again, to recap, David is going to present to the board a set of operating principles for the board. We will use that as a template to begin to look at committees, to add to those resolutions that we will enable in the spring. And we will ask management to begin to draft the appropriate language for the partner programs.
Why don't we ask management to draft the resolution
Yes.
for the committees
That'd be
too
great.
and add it so that we have a consistent language
Yeah, that would-
with both. I think
Sure,
that'd
that
be
makes
good.
sense.
So what I draft, I will send what I had drafted last June that the board basically agreed upon, but we never did anything with it. So I will share that with all and then revamp it. And then there may be ideas in there that are applicable for partner program, or most of it won't be, but some of it may be applicable for partner programs and or committees.
I'll use it as a base and I can.
Just a base, just
I'm looking around the room. Is there any objection to
No.
that? We good?
No.
Any other comment on that? We have about 8 minutes left. The next item was potential CJC board changes. We've already talked about that.
It's done.
So I think we're good there. Next is town hall email addresses versus private addresses for CROA business. I'll just say very clearly, you've got to use your town hall address, every member of the board. If you are on a committee, we need you using your town hall address.
Goes in the standards.
For business.
Okay, so here's the problem I have. Having been the prior board president, and having all the finance committee stuff and stuff like that, if people don't look at their town hall address, where you want, but if they don't look at it, you don't do business. I don't want to fire committee members because they have too many emails to check from different things and they use a personal address. I mean, so I'm begging the board to reconsider this because.
Let me ask Warren, what's the reason for having or maybe I should ask Jim, but let me start with Warren.
Okay.
What's the reason for having these addresses all standardized as they are?
Well, I think one of the main reasons is record keeping. We know then with town hall email addresses, we can access those email addresses if there's a records request and we can provide the requisite information instead of having to go to Joe, a board member, and say, okay, I need you to dig through your personal email and trust that they're providing us all the requisite records. I will just say also, it provides an extra protection for committee members, so it doesn't open up your personal email, cell phone to public records request if we ever got to that big of an issue.
Well, and then the other thing is we're talking about running as a business. Can you imagine talking to your employer and say, having my employee address is too much. I'm going to just forward all those. So don't do it. It's a reality of today that we have to check multiple accounts. Mm-hmm. And if they communicate another way and no one's copied, right, then we don't have that for e-discovery. And we as a business do not own those emails. It's sort of where we're at with CCMC when we had to do requests.
Okay, can I throw out a compromise? What if we said we were going to go to email groupings? So if you're on one of these committees, you can have your town hall address and a personal address out there, if they choose to have a personal address out there, and then they understand the risk that they're taking about having their personal email addresses discoverable in a legal action or something like that, but we've got the history out of the way.
I have a comment from Kevin online saying the same email was created for records and protection / safety of CROA documents and information. It's a simple item to follow.
For a board member, I think it's required. I'm just trying to figure out how many, because there's a lot of committee people who don't.
Yeah.
That's my issue.
Yeah.
And I agree with Kevin's statement is correct, but if you don't have communication, that's where I'm struggling.
They're just not, having the materials ahead of time.
We need to enable them to be able to use that email address, whatever that takes, if
The
it's
town
training
hall.
classes or whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
It's not, people know how to use email. So I mean, my problem is finance committee. I mean, 2/3 of the people wouldn't check it. I mean, they're just not going to check it.
Make it a requirement.
Replace them,
And then they don't have the information for the
Okay, you
meeting.
make it a requirement. What are you going to do if they don't check it? I mean, I'm trying to be honest. I mean, there's business also. We're also doing business.
What do you do if they don't show up for meetings? What do you do if they don't participate? We need to talk about people who aren't participating in the committees. That is part of the participation.
But they're unpaid volunteers.
I understand that, but they're unpaid volunteers who have decided that they want to volunteer time for the community. And this is how we are becoming more of a business. This is how we are covering ourselves legally. And my personal opinion, if they don't have time to do that, then maybe they don't have time to be on the committee.
Wow.
Is someone going to speak for a minute?
Nobody gets out of here.
Speak for a minute, Mike.
Close the lock, Mike, you're in.
I'm one of those guys that doesn't do it. And I don't do it because I have two other boards I sit on and a nonprofit that want me to use, and a university that want me to use their emails. Everybody has compromised or made it work for me by having my email address, my personal email address attached with the business address. So I don't understand why that's not a problem. I really don't. And to make a generalized statement that these people maybe aren't committed enough to be here and they should go to something else. I take great exception with that. Great. And I'd be more than happy to resign right now. I've got to sit here quiet the whole day. And I'm going to stop right now because my wife is telling me to, and that's it.
I have a resident comment online from Charles Richards who said you should actually publish the town hall email addresses on the committee page and direct residents to said page so they can speak with committee members.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to put your personal email address up on that spot, I think you have the right. We don't have the right to put it up, but if you want to put it up, I think we could. I don't ever want to discourage participation. And I think to Mike's comment, we should be careful about doing anything that would limit that. The compromise that's being suggested, unless our legal counsel tells us we can't do it, seems like the next best step right now, and gets us to that level. Lauren?
I would also say that as a matter of course, we do have the ability to have the town hall email address and a personal email address in our system. So it's accessible for management to say, okay, we need to put both of these email addresses on there. That way we have the email to the town hall email for record keeping purposes, and individuals who don't want to check it but are committed can then check their personal email address.
So if you needed to send something to Dog Park Committee, which has 5 members, you might have 8 addresses in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I do need to apologize to Mike, even though he's not here. I certainly was not trying to besmirch the contribution that he makes to this town. I know it's great. But I also believe that we need to treat it like a business. If we make an exception for Mike, that's fine, because he may have a different history than some other people. But to presume that everyone has 7 email accounts and that's too much, and say, oh, well, we couldn't do e-discovery because of that, or we don't have all the emails, or it has to extend. I don't think it's practical to do, but maybe we can get a legal.
One last comment, and then we're going to.
Debbie.
And I have to speak to you because I know being on the committees, and I know other people on other committees, we do not. We all have our personal emails. And we have went over this, had town hall talk to us and everything, and we all said, we will only do our, so you're going to lose a lot of people. So there you go.
what I wanted to do to defend Mike Jackson is I wanted to say Mike Jackson is one of about 40 people that I know in this situation. I have learned how to copy all 4 of them. There are several board members on this board now who I had to do that with for quite a while. And we'll.
All right, let's do this. I'm going to seek a consensus of the board that we will continue to encourage the use of the town hall addresses. We will allow private email addresses to be included in that, and we will ask for an opinion from legal counsel to make sure that we're appropriate. Is that the consensus of the board? Is there anyone that objects to that?
I would just like to say one thing. We have on the committees, like we have one for the recreation committee.
One email address, you mean?
Like for special events, we have one email.
Right.
So the committee members can still use their personal email.
Well, that's what we're suggesting.
Right.
I just said that.
That's what
But
we're
I'm just
suggesting.
trying
No,
to
those are actually distribution groups,
They are.
which sends it out to their
Right.
emails. And if it is a personal email, it only goes to their personal email.
Right.
You know, I will stand as a lone dissenter because of the reasons that I stated, not because of anything else that was interpreted from what I said. I want to have as many volunteers as possible, but I also want us, you know, to be able to run it like a business.
All right. So having said that, there is not a full consensus, so I'm just going to take a roll call vote. So I've made the recommendation that we use both addresses. We have the distribution email. Brian?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Celia?
Yes. Did you need somebody to second that? No?
I'm just
Okay,
going to be
just-
a dictator.
Okay.
No.
No. And I'll vote yes. All right. With that, we are now going to take a recess to allow Tom to come in. For those of you that are online, we are going offline for a board certification class for the next 2 hours. We will be back. After that, we are doing insurance for a half an hour. Then we're doing training from 2 to 3 on Cyranet. So to the community, we will be back to reconvene this meeting at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Thank you all for your participation. And we stand in recess for the next few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.